What's up, everybody? What's up, MGTOW? So, today I'd like to talk about the demoralization of men. Now, not so much specifically the morals of men, but the demoralization of men, which is somewhat related to morals. Now, if you want to look at morals from a kind of objective or atheistic standpoint, then you can just look at it as a set of logic that dictates how people interact with one another in a group or in a society or any type of system where more than two people have to interact with each other. Now, from a biological view, we can kind of use the RK selection theory as a kind of dialectic to look at how morals work or how people become demoralized. Because you can't really have one or the other system when it comes to humans, even though RK selection theory doesn't directly apply to humans because all humans are case selected comparatively to other animals. But you can look at it as kind of our selection is more working with a group of people and having more morals because you have to have more morals when you're working with a group of people. And when things are abundant, then you have the opportunity to work with people. And also when you're competing against the environment because there's resources, and then the only other things that you have to compete against are other animals that are outside of your group that aren't humans, then you can have a more R-selected theory. But when the perceived supply of resources, at least from our technological capabilities now, starts to be perceived as less, then people move towards a more case-selected theory, and case selection doesn't really allow for morals. Because when you're competing with another man for the perceived small amount of resources that are left, then you can't use morals, so you become more, more vicious, more amoral. So, because you're competing against men, so therefore using a moral system to interact with men that's supposed to benefit everybody goes against case selection theory. So we can see the demoralization manifesting in society in many ways. And even people that try to be moral or try to at least enact some level of trying to operate within the group for the good of the group, you can see that it doesn't work out for them. Like, we can take a simple example of looking at the naive view of President Trump. So let's just say that, President Trump is an elite and whatever, well, he is an elite, but let's say that he saw what was going on in the country and he actually wanted to try to make things better for the group, better for everybody, since, his base is in the country and his businesses are located within the country, and the protection that he's provided by the military for his businesses throughout the world is all based in the United States. So for him, even as an individual, it's a benefit for him to increase the prosperity of the entire country. Now, within the naive view of Trump, one could say that, he thought the government was just like any other business and that he could just come into the government, fire the people that weren't doing their job properly, hire people that could do the job better, cut the fat, and then everything would be running smoothly and everybody would be prospering because technically the citizens of the country are the shareholders of the government. And so the government, if you look at the government like a corporation, it should work that way. You just fire everybody that's not getting their job done, hire people that can get the job done, get rid of excess spending, and everything should be running smoothly. But the problem is, the government isn't a business. It is a corporation, but it's not a business. The government is there to control people and to stop people from being able to get resources. So the government in itself is a case selected type of system because it's not there to provide abundance for people. It's there to limit people's access to resources. And it's mostly developed, at least a Western style government is developed by more case selected cultures that were in places that had limited resources. So therefore it follows that a Western style government is there to limit people's access to resources. So when we look at what the state is, what the government is, it's basically a group of men trying to stop other men from being able to create resources and produce resources, because when men produce resources, then they produce families. And since there's a perceived limited amount of resources, therefore the government's job is to reduce the amount of men that are able to produce families. So therefore they can't use up the resources that the government perceives as its own resources, because the government owns all the land in the United States. So therefore, if you're not within the good graces of the government or in the government, then you're outside the group. And therefore, they want to limit your access to being able to produce resources. And that's where you get all the regulations and all the laws and everything stopping you from just, going outside of your house, planting some food, and then selling that food or eating that food. And there's tons of places where, growing food is illegal. There's tons of places where having solar panels on your house is illegal. And these are all laws created by the government. So in a modern kind of secular, I don't want to say atheist, but secular state, then legality becomes morality. So there's no longer an objective set of morals that everybody lives by. The state lives by one set of morals, or is amoral, but then at the same time, they're enforcing legality as morality onto the wider mass of people that are not in the government. And so through this, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance, because one can look at the government and say, they're not following the same set of rules, the same set of morals that we're following. And so therefore the government is unjust. And that's why no matter what group you're in, whether you're white or black or Latino, Hispanic, Asian, all groups have experienced quote unquote injustice from the government based on this cognitive dissonance that the government is allowed to do one set of things and the citizens are not allowed to do those same things. And so therefore the citizens become demoralized, and specifically men, because we're not allowed to do certain things to produce and then provide for families. So I think that I've proven that the media is part of the government. At least the mainstream media, the legacy media, as Sticks, Hex, and Hammer calls it, is an arm of the government. It's controlled by the government. It's controlled by the FCC. It gets funding from the government or tax breaks, however you want to look at it. It's the same thing. And they produce things that are basically approved of by the government. So then you see certain images on TV of certain people with certain status being able to do certain things. And again, that cognitive dissonance comes in, and you see that certain people are allowed to, have private islands and rape children, but you go to jail if you spit your gum out on the train. And then you start to become demoralized because of that, because you're like, I can't even spit my gum out on the train without going to jail, but this guy gets to do whatever he wants. It doesn't make any sense. And so it causes cognitive dissonance. And then we can see that with other things, like, for example, the transgender agenda, where, again, men from all groups are being subject to this kind of feminization of, what would be considered maybe even alpha males within their group. So I hear white people complaining about, the feminization of their men. Like, for instance, somebody like Bruce Jenner, who, for all intents and purposes, might have been considered America's greatest Olympian, because that's what he was famous for. Before he was famous for becoming a woman, he was, I think, the most gold medal holding Olympian in American history. Like, he had the most gold medals over or across the most amount of Olympic events. So he could have easily been considered America's greatest male Olympian, and then they put him on TV as a woman trying to copy his daughters to get likes on Instagram. And then that makes you wonder, well, what's the point? What's the point of being a great Olympian if turning into a woman gets you more likes and more praise, and like, people didn't even remember him for being an Olympian, a lot of people, but everybody remembers him for being a woman. And similarly, in black culture, you've got the Medea movies. I don't even know how many Medea movies they put out, but it's a guy that's dressed up like Grandmama from that guy that was on the Charlotte Hornets, and he's one of the richest black people in the United States. So for any group to say that, oh, it's only happening to my group, it's only happening to us, and they're showing black people looking strong, or black people are saying they're showing white people looking strong, but they're doing it to everybody. It's just like, if you only watch BET and they're targeting you as a black person, you're only going to see the stuff that's targeted towards black people. And if you're a white person and you watch ABC, then you're only going to see the stuff that's targeted towards white people. And that's why I try and watch all different types of stuff. And basically my thing is that if you're watching the commercials and the commercials are actually stuff that you want to buy, then you should stop watching that show immediately, because that means that that show is targeted directly towards you. Because if you're like, oh yeah, I'd like to buy some of those sneakers on that commercial, or oh yeah, I like those clothes, or I like that car, that means that that show is specifically targeted towards you by psychologists, and that they know exactly what you're going to be watching. So again, the media targets men, and they show people that are such high status, and you just wonder how they get there. You wonder how, a Kim Kardashian becomes a billionaire. You're like, I go to work every day, I work hard, and this person's an idiot, and they're a billionaire, so there must be some other thing that you have to do to become a billionaire besides work hard and, do what you're supposed to do. And so it demoralizes you. It makes you think, well, I can't win. There's no way, if I just work hard and do what I'm supposed to do, and these people are not working hard and not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're rich and they're high status, then I don't know what to do, because it's cognitive dissonance. And again, the similar thing happens with the deracination of ethnicities or cultures, however you want to look at it, because again, white people complain that, they're teaching them white guilt in the schools about slavery, but what about black people? They're teaching us that we were slaves and that we were getting whipped and beat. I mean, don't you think that might have a little bit of a psychological effect too? It's not like, whenever people say, oh, it's just my group, but they're doing it to my group, and they're using all the groups against each other. That's what they're doing. That's how it works in a balkanized society like this. They get all the other groups to fight against each other, and then you need the government to come in and play referee for you. So when they demoralize you and tell you that your culture is bad and that your culture is wrong or your culture is weak or whatever they tell you, specifically targeted towards you and your group and how you look and your ethnicity, then that leads to deracination, because then you start to think, oh, well, my group's bad, so I guess I should just, forget about my ethnic heritage and my cultural heritage and just kind of be like everybody else and fit into this moral system that the government has created through legality, which isn't a real moral system. Then, I'll get along a lot better if I just follow the laws, because the laws now are the morals. But then again, the trans thing sneaks back in there, because then once you're deracinated and de-ethnicized or whatever, and legality is morality, and then they start telling you that the law says that a trans man or a trans woman is a woman and not a man, and then what are you supposed to do? Because now your morality is legality. So once your morality becomes legality, and then the government changes the laws, then they can say that, oh, well, people can have sex with a 9-year-old girl or a 9-year-old boy. I mean, it's legal, right? There's no such thing as morals, and it's legal. So once it becomes legal, then who cares? If a dad tries to say, oh, no, you can't go with Jim Bob down the street, little Timmy, and then the government shows up to your house and shoots the dad because he's not letting his 9-year-old son go down the street with Jim Bob, you really don't have an argument, because you don't believe in morals. You just believe in legality. Legality is morality once you live in a secular state with atheistic values. So you can't make an argument against it, because whatever is legal is moral. Then, of course, as Jack Dorsey famously said at the end of the Joe Rogan interview, the second one, which was kind of something that a lot of people seem to have brushed over, was the fact that he said, code is law. And when he was talking about code is law, he was talking about how they're designing the computer systems that are going to become the new morality, the new law. And that they're designing the code that's going to become the law. So then when we see as men that they're telling us, whether it's true or not, that AI is going to be able to outperform us in all productive activities, and men's main function is being productive and taking raw resources and transferring them into more usable resources, and then they're telling us that a computer is going to be able to do it better than the smartest man. You see Stephen Hawking over there, there's going to be a computer that's 100 times smarter than him. Albert Einstein, he's got nothing on the new AI, So when they're telling you this, then you're going to start to believe it, because the state dictates how you think. Because if you're an atheist, then the only thing that's correct is power. And since the state has monopoly on force, on power, then whatever the state says is true. You can't argue with the state. They shoot you. So therefore, when code becomes law and the robot army gets rolled out, and then AI says, hey, what's wrong with having sex with 9-year-olds? And then they send the robot army to your house because you won't let your own son go down the street with Jim Bob. You don't have an argument against it, because your argument is that force or power makes things correct, makes right. So therefore, legality becomes morality, and then the state is telling you that you're wrong, and then AI comes in and they tell you that AI can do everything that you can do better than you can do it, so we don't really have a need for you anymore. And especially since they've collected so much semen from so many men, I don't even know why men use sperm banks. That's crazy. The government is in a position where they could just kill off all men. They really could. They could kill off all the men, especially the ones that don't go along with it. And then cucking becomes evolution. Because if the state is always correct, if the law is always morality, and the law dictates that being a cuck, being a man that takes a raw deal for marriage and signs his rights away and signs everything away to a woman, is the only way that you can reproduce, and reproducing is the highest value for a Darwinist atheist, and all other thoughts that you have are just made up, mouth sounds and made up electrical impulses by your brain designed for you to reproduce, then being a quote-unquote cuck is the highest evolution, or it's the next evolution of man. And in fact, men like men in MGTOW and other groups that, are looking at feminism and the way that the laws are set up as being something that's wrong, you can't say that because the state is always correct. Power is always right. So therefore, being a cuck is actually the correct course of action. And these things that you have in your mind that you call principles, like not wanting to be a cuck, is actually a dysgenic electrical impulse being produced by your mind that's allowing you to not reproduce and therefore making you an insane person. And that's why you see guys wearing Beta Cuck for Life t-shirts now, because that's approved by the government. And what's approved by the government is correct. And so therefore being a cuck is moral because it's legal. It's not legal to not be a cuck because that's the way the laws are set up. If you don't want to be a cuck, then you're not following the law. And so therefore you're not being moral. Now, feminism itself is probably one of the greatest sources of cognitive dissonance and demoralization for men. When you look at how the laws are set up so that you have to be a cuck. And then everywhere you turn, just like with the AI, they're telling you, true or not, that women are at least as good as, if not better than men. Oh, women can do this and women can do that, and women are the greatest, and women are goddesses and worship women, and women are doing better at school, women are doing better in work, women are doing better everywhere. Women can cheat on you and then you still have to give them half of your money. Women can abort babies or keep babies, do whatever they want with the babies. You can't do anything about it because you're not the state. So you're never correct. You're just an individual. And since legality is morality, then anyone that opposes the current legal system is immoral. And since amorality is the current way that the government operates, then having any type of thought that is objective or anything that doesn't fit in exactly to how the government sets the laws up is amoral or immoral. So you can see how it's just a big way to demoralize people, because it seems as if there is some type of objective morality. Otherwise, we couldn't speak of things being right and wrong and there existing anything other than just electrical impulses in our brain, and then words are just mouth sounds that come out and may or may not represent some things in the real world. And so therefore, things start to get really confusing and people don't know what to think. And then that leads to demoralization, because once you don't know what to think, then you start to say, oh, well, I guess we're going to have to follow the laws, which become the morality. But in reality, there is a way that people, or at least an objectively better way that people can interact with each other. And when it comes to men and women, it seems like patriarchy is that objectively better way for men and women to interact with each other, because it produces the best results statistically for society and for individuals. But that's not the legality. That's not the prevailing morality of the day. And in fact, being a cuck is moral in this system. So that's all I got for this video. Hope you guys have a good day, and go MGTOW.